building real bonds with real foundation and real love and acceptance and judgment free and safe zones and boundaries, healthy boundaries. I've never had this stuff in my life before. I've never acknowledged it, right? I wake up every morning, I do my routine, I exercise, I meditate, I pray, I write my gratitude list, I read different inspirational stuff that motivates me. Everybody's creating these alter egos of what people want us to be.
Yeah.
So why can't we reverse this and say, just be you, find out who you are? Because none of us even know. Until you start doing that work, we have no clue who we are and what we like and what we want to be involved in. Like, we can think we're the happiest people in the world, but until we do that deep work, we don't even know who we are. Like, we could think we're happy working this job for 25 years and one day just wake up and kill ourselves because society says we failed, right? Like, I mean, it's all these little things. And at the end of the day, society needs to change.
Welcome to the Onward Podcast. I hope you're having a great 2021 so far. Today, my guest is Michael Padurano, and I met him through a mutual friend. And Michael's core purpose is to elevate humanity through knowledge and understanding. If you're on LinkedIn, you should follow him. He's always on there. In fact, just over the holidays, he did, I think it was 13 or 14 days of videos every day to let people know that they're not alone. And I was honored to be one of his guests on the 2nd of January. You'll see in this interview that Michael's just down to earth. He is staying at an Airbnb with his kids as he goes through a custody issue. And so you'll hear his kids sometimes in the background. He's really a good dad, very patient with them. Michael's been through a lot. He's been homeless 3 times. He had a house fire where he lost everything. He's drowned. He says he's clinically died 12 to 13 times. He knows he is still here on Earth for a reason. His purpose is to elevate humanity through knowledge and understanding. And boy, does Michael share a lot of knowledge in this interview. Listen and learn how Michael was finally able to tell himself that he loves himself. How Michael was finally able to figure out who he is and to be comfortable being with himself. As Michael says, finding yourself is the greatest gift. Mike, welcome to the Onward Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we met through a mutual friend, mutual point of contact, Russ Barnes. In fact, today is, what day is today? November 4th, the day after the election. And I'm editing Russ's episode to go to the editor. So I want to have his episode published on Veterans Day since he's a veteran. Normally, I don't publish an episode on Wednesdays. It's usually every Monday, but I just listened to his again. What a great guy he is.
Yeah, I mean, that's a special day for a special guy. I mean, he's really on top of it. He sees things for what they are, and he really wants to help people. He's on a mission. So
yeah. Oh, definitely. And we met through him because I guess you were talking to him. He knows about my son's sober. My son just celebrated his 4-year anniversary of being sober. You're at what, 14 and a half years?
Yeah. I'm almost at 14 and a half years. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been a really long time.
Well, you want to just delve right into it? Tell us what you've been through.
Sure. I was verbally and physically abused as a kid. I was adopted at birth. My adoptive mother is really who abused me because she just had issues at the time. And my father worked a lot, so it was really left to her devices. They weren't able to get pregnant. And then 4 years after they adopted me, 4.5 years after adopted me, they had my sister, which was actually them getting pregnant. And I never felt like I fit in. I always felt like I was an outsider. I'm an empath, a true empath. So the family I grew up in and my adoptive family never understood what that meant. So it was always, you're a little bit out there, you're a little bit different, you're a little bit crazy. Let's go to therapists, let's go to psychologists, all these different things. I mean, I wet the bed till either 9 or 11 years old. I would cry in class because I was extremely sensitive, still am. And, in the 80s growing up, that wasn't something that was really accepted, a male that was sensitive. And my parents growing up in Brooklyn, not even women come out of Brooklyn sensitive. So it was definitely a different type of childhood. Not in bad ways. I mean, my parents really tried their best and they did love me and they do love me. My mom passed about 9 years ago, which I was able to fix that relationship before she did, thank God. Me and my dad are still working things out. It's better than ever, but we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. So it's different. It's a different world.
Yeah. Well, how were you able to fix that relationship with your mom? Because you said she's the one that verbally and physically abused you. How does one go about fixing a relationship like that?
Well, I got sober before it happened, so thank God for that. Because doing my 4-step, doing the rest of the steps definitely helped me do it, right? It making amends and owning my side of it and sitting down and having those honest conversations. In 1994, when I was about 15 years old, my mother got diagnosed with something called scleroderma, which is a chronic disease, and they gave her a very short timeline. She lived till 2011. So fortunately, I was able to get past my drug and alcohol use, which I started drinking at 9, started doing hardcore drugs by the time I was 11 or 12. And it just spiraled from there because at some point, some of it was to hide, some of it was to run from who I am and what I am being an empath, because I never felt like I fit in. So I did figure out different calculations of how much to use and abuse to be able to numb that out. So I did it. And I went from that to being the life of the party. And I went from that to being the center of everybody's attention and world. And, I was still able to have my abilities to some extent and be there for people and be the anti-bully because I always stopped bullying. I just never, because I was bullied as a kid also until I outgrew the bullies. And then I wasn't bullied anymore. So at that point going forward, I started protecting kids that couldn't protect themselves. And there's so much layered into this, right? Like it was so many things. In kindergarten, they said I was slow to develop, so they put me into something called pre-first, which thank God doesn't exist anymore because that was a waste of a year of my life. And then by 5th grade, I was put into gifted classes. 6th grade, they put me into honors classes, AP classes. By the time I was in 8th grade, I was already taking high school math. 7th grade, actually, I took high school math, which I failed year over year because I wouldn't show my work. I wasn't a great student because I didn't like doing homework. I thought it was pointless. It didn't make sense to me, right? I've never been good at following directions, which is probably why I didn't go into the military ever. It wasn't a consideration in my life because it wouldn't have worked out for me. Not well, anyway. I wouldn't have conformed. So it would have lasted about a day.
Where'd you get the alcohol and the drugs at age 9?
Okay, so the drugs didn't come from my parents. The alcohol did. Uh-huh. My parents were always throwing the parties, the 4th of July parties, the Thanksgiving parties. It was the house that all the family came together, that all the whole neighborhood came together. My dad did very well financially at that time in the 80s, and he always bought all the fireworks for the neighborhood. And so it was like the center of all that. My parents weren't really drinkers at all other than those occasions, and they were social drinkers. So I figured out that water would replace silver rum or replace vodka, and that flat soda would replace burgundy or brown rum. So, I was always a little bit too smart for my own good. And apparently
pouring it back into the container so it looked like, well, I know that because that's what my son did. Yeah. And I didn't really know it, but he would look at where the mark was, and then he would drink, and then he would make it go back up to that level. And then one night at the time, his stepdad and his dad sat down to, have a drink, which was very rare. And Tim's like, this doesn't really taste right.
Right.
So it got figured out, but there's all these little tricks. But what does it look like to have that reconciliation with your mom? Did you get into really in-depth conversations where you said, why did you verbally and physically abuse me? Or did you have discussions about that? Do you understand where she came from and maybe why she was that way? Or did you just kind of forget? Did you just say that's in the past, no use going into it, I'm not going to talk about it with her?
In lots of ways, I wrote it off, right? She was many years into her disease at that point, and she was getting frailer and frailer. And honestly, once she got diagnosed, she really changed as a person. She let go of her bitterness and what she grew up with generationally. So she let go a lot of that anger, and she was never the same person again. I think by the time I was 9 or 10, she actually let go a lot of her anger. She had a thyroid issue that was not diagnosed. There was her and my dad were fighting at end. My dad wasn't around because he was always working. So it was very challenging, right? It was a challenging time for everybody. I'm sure in some ways she felt less than because she wasn't able to have children. And then my sister was like the miracle baby when the stress was off. It was not an ideal situation, and my parents weren't very good for each other. They really didn't bring out the best in each other in any way, shape, or form. So since I was 27 when I got sober in 2006, I was already an adult. I didn't take responsibility for anything, obviously, but I was an adult. And I guess by learning to forgive myself, right, and taking ownership through the 4 steps, basically just wrote it off. And the emotional damage, I honestly didn't deal with until this summer. I didn't get rid of the emotional damage until this summer. I released it finally going through Brene Brown's books and going through shaming, blaming, and guilting and all those things and releasing it, right? Writing it out, burning it, praying, meditating. I mean, I now have a whole new routine. And in the last 4 or 5 months, my whole life is different than it was even when I first met you.
Wow. Wow.
Like I've gone through.
I hear birds. Do I hear birds?
Yeah, I'm outside. I mean, you have 2 TVs running, 2 phones running, and a tablet running. So
you got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 3-year-old you had to get away from.
Yeah, I mean, because I took emergency custody of them because they were being abused by their mother and her boyfriend March 6th. And then March 17th, COVID shut the world down. And I've been stranded in Arkansas since. So finally had my first court date last week. And now I have custody. And then I have a final hearing in March, which I'll hopefully get permanent custody because the judge saw that it was in the best interest of the children to be with me. So
wow, that's really hard to see your kids go through what you went through as well.
Well, being an empath is an advantage, right? Because I know what they went through. I can feel what they're feeling today. I understand where they're at. I've got them into therapy. They're going through. I'm there for them. I'm always present. I'm always with them. They're starting to trust adults and really make progress, right? And as I've gone through this transformation and I've changed, I notice that they're changing completely too. Because as my energy is shifting and my personality is shifting and everything I do is shifting, they're shifting because they're just getting more comfortable, right? My whole life, I was never comfortable in my own skin. I didn't say to myself that I love myself until August. It was sometime in August, the first time in my life that I ever said I love myself.
Well, I've been learning too, and you've probably learned this, that our lives are a reflection of us. So your kids are reacting to the changes that you're making, and that's definitely helping them. And being able to love yourself, then others can love you.
Well, and they're all gifted also, right? They're all empaths or some form or fashion, so they feel it and they feed off it, right? What you put out to others is what they're going to give you back.
Yeah.
So when I was in a bad mental space, when I first got them for the first 2.5 months, they were more chaotic than when I first picked them up because I was in a bad place.
Mm-hmm.
As I started working my way through that, and it's been a ton of work. I mean, I've done pretty much an emotional 4-step over the last 3-4 months.
Did you have a counselor that you worked with, or you just did this on your own? Or
I mean, I worked with, Annie Lieb is a huge credit to everything I do. She's a huge credit to who I am today. Sherry Lewick, Andrea Summers. I have like this circle of trust, I call it, of people that I trust with my life and people that I've brought into my circle that I have their back, they have my back. And I've formed these close bonds with them that it's my own soul family almost, right? Like you can call it that in a way. And it's just this, I'm 41 years old and I've never had an intimate relationship of any capacity. And this is coming from a guy with 3 kids. I've never allowed intimacy into anything I do. So now I'm learning about all that and I'm building real bonds with real foundation and real love and acceptance and judgment free and safe zones and boundaries, healthy boundaries. I've never had this stuff in my life before. I've never acknowledged it, right? I wake up every morning, I do my routine, I exercise, I meditate, I pray, I write my gratitude list, I read different inspirational stuff that motivates me to remind me. Matt is another person. Wow, I can't remember his last name right now. Oh, Gagnon. He's another person. He's helped me tremendously. Like he was there when I was at my worst, and he's a coach, and he helped me work on my mindset. And it's all the pieces. It's the fact that all these different things came in at once, right? Because I've been doing emotional work, spiritual work, physical work, and really changing my whole life. I mean, I'm down 35 pounds in the last 4 or 5 months.
Do you think this would have happened if you hadn't been stranded in Arkansas after you went and rescued your kids? If you had been able to get back, if COVID hadn't happened, you were able to get back. I mean, I know it's hard to know, but where do you think you'd be now?
I'd be miserable. Nothing would be right in my life. Being stranded here is the best thing that's ever happened to me. 2020 is my best year of my whole life. And that's weird to say, but it really is. 2020 is everything to me. Like I've changed for the rest of my life. I mean, I'm only halfway through, right? I'm 41 years old. If I live to 82, 87, 88, whatever it is in my 80s, I'm halfway there. I'm just getting started.
No,
like Yeah, and I've done so much in my life, and I have so much experience, and I help others too. Like I spend so many hours a day helping others find themselves.
How do you do that? Are you a coach?
No, nah,
Mhm.
I would never call myself that. But I help them with spirituality. I help guide them. I help them in business. I'm always reaching out to people to see how I can be of service to them,
Mhm.
right? And I just give back. I always give back. I love giving back. And don't misunderstand. It's not like I'm this fortune tycoon, right? Like I'm not sitting on a bankroll that I can do those things. Financially, I'm probably in the worst position of my whole life, but I don't care. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. It's all
Mhm.
going to work out. It's all going to happen and fall in place. And I really just, I'm picking up good people and just lifting them to their best selves. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I have the worth and self-worth and value that I'm picking myself up also.
Yep. And
And
then
I've
that
never
comes back to you. Yeah. That's
and
awesome.
I've never done it before, right? Like the synchronicity and the way that the world works, serendipity and everything else that falls in place. I can recall the exact conversation that changed my life, and it was with Annie, right? Annie Lee. March 5th was the day before I got my kids, and I was probably at the lowest moment of my life, wanted to give up on everything I was doing, like just give up. I was sitting in Arkansas waiting 10 days for the paperwork to go through to get my kids after getting the evidence of the physical abuse that they went through. So as a parent that had no contact with his children for 5, 6, no wait, hang on, I didn't speak to them since August, so about 7 months, right? It ripped my heart out, right? And I'm an extra sensitive person, naturally just a sensitive person. So I'm not your typical father that's, hey, I love you, good job, bud. That's not me. I'm more like that mothering nature because I want to be involved in every aspect of their life. And my soon-to-be ex-wife cut me out completely.
So how did
Um,
you know that they were being abused if you hadn't really seen or talked to them?
her family sent me evidence, her family, and actually testified on my side
Wow.
because they didn't see the kids go through it anymore. My soon to be ex wife has untreated mental illness, and she's always been this way, and she's getting worse progressively as she gets older. And while everyone enabled her, including me, I enabled her completely too. Everybody's starting to see her for what she is. And what happens is, as they start picking up on those things, she cuts them out of their life, out of her life.
Yeah.
And then she keeps the kids as leverage. So she was using the kids for checks, for different checks from the government, different checks for different reasons. And like going in front of the judge and having this conversation and being on the stand. And luckily, I was very fortunate, being in the deep South, that he saw through it. Because being in a small town in small town USA in the deep South, taking kids away from their mother is not easy to do. But it's also a time where child abuse is so rampant that the law is stepping up and doing the right thing by the kids. And there was many issues with that small town. Don't get me wrong. There's many issues. And I had many issues with authorities there.
Mhm.
Like I was the outsider. I was the guy that was doing wrong. I was crazy. I was just trying to harass her. I was trying to be in, just make her life miserable. And she even had, officers and local people testify to that or give affidavits on that fact. But luckily, the lawyer saw, the judge saw through it.
What's your relationship with your sister?
Well, there's a funny story to this. Me and my sister get along very well now, actually. Considering that we have completely different personalities, different ways of living life, and different expectations out of life, we get along amazingly, right? So you have to take all those things into consideration. She's very traditional. She's the at-home mom. They both, the husband has a W-2 job. I don't believe in those things, so it's a completely different perspective on life and how to raise children and all those things. I don't believe in that either. I believe in blunt honesty and truth. I tell my kids the truth, right? Like Tuesday night, I said, tomorrow's court, there's a chance you're going back with her, but if that happens, I'm not leaving and I'm not going anywhere until you're safe. So I handle things differently than most people. I
Mhm.
believe in blunt honesty to the extreme, right? Like I will be in somebody's face and tell them exactly how I feel, not to hurt them or cripple them, but so that I can help them pick up the pieces when it's done. Because you can't live in a facade. You can't live not being your true self and be okay. It impacts everybody around you. Ironically, a few months ago, my birth family found me.
I was wondering, I was going to ask you that. They found you.
A few months ago, yeah, like a couple months ago, it was my biological sister found me because of ancestry. So it was this weird thing where everything started coming together in my life. I was making all these life transformations, and she found me.
Oh my
And
gosh.
and and
Were
it's
you ever
funny
going
because
to look for your family, for your birth family?
no, it was never important to me, and I'll explain. Because I started going to therapists and psychologists so young because they always thought something was wrong with me. They would say, "Oh, it's abandonment issues. It's this, it's that," and I learned how to neglect abandonment. Like I just didn't believe that was true. as an adult, going through Brene Brown, going through other people, going through all this work that I've been doing, I've realized that I always abandon myself, right? And that I learned from Sherry Lewis, who just published her book and everything else, and she's an amazing person. I should introduce you to her, actually.
I'd love to meet her. I'd love to read it. Yeah.
And I'm going through her group therapy stuff, and I did one-on-ones with her. I did tons of stuff for trauma healing. And as I'm going through this 2020, which was this horrible year for the world, my year gets better and better every day. Like, I have down moments, and I was extremely anxious coming into this because I don't know why. I really don't.
Yeah, coming into this interview.
Right. And I don't know why. Maybe it's the anticipation because we booked it so long ago. And, I just didn't, I was in a different place when we booked it. And when we talked, I was in a different place. So I wasn't sure, what the expectations were. And I didn't know, I guess I created self-expectations at that point, right? How am I going to live up to whatever I was at that moment? And then Annie reminded me that all I have to do is be myself.
Yep.
Right? And that's it. That's all it is.
And I lead a movement on authenticity. So I support that. Yes.
It's tough, though. It's really challenging sometimes just to be yourself, right?
So how did your birth family find you? You get something in the mail, or did you get a phone call? What happened?
No, my biological sister reached out to me on Facebook. Like, one day I got a message and it said, "I think you're my brother. Can we talk?" And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, it took me about 20 minutes to respond because I didn't know how to answer it.
Yeah.
It was like this strange, like, I didn't know how to react, right? It was just almost this, what do I say to this? Like, I don't know, right? And I just said, you know what? Here's my number. Call me. And we ended up talking for like 4 hours that day. Apparently, she's been looking for me. My biological
option too. Had she been?
No, I think she's 5 or 6 years younger than me. So when my biological mother had me, she was 15. Her father was abusive, and so was her uncle. And she didn't want to bring me into that house. My biological father doesn't even know I exist. And that's just kind of how that works. They were from Mississippi, and the father moved them down to Davie, Florida, which is where I grew up, ironically. I grew up like right around the corner from where they lived, which was even stranger, right? Because it was just all strange. The whole thing, the similarities, and I guess the timing of it was amazing, right? Because I don't think any other time in my life I would have accepted it graciously. I wasn't at a mental space that I could have. It is, because I don't think I was ever at a spot where I could have accepted it, where I could have understood. And because I was doing all this work and I was reinventing myself and transforming and everything that I am today and continue to be each day, and the constant evolution, I was able to accept it graciously. And in some way, it filled this void that I never knew I had. And it wasn't about like, oh, great, I have 2 families now. It wasn't great, I have people, more people around me. I mean, there is those advantages, but for me, it was this deep-rooted, never fitting in and never feeling like I belonged anywhere in my life. And then finding out that my biological family is all empaths, and finding out that they all had drug issues, finding out that it all made sense. It just made me feel like I belonged somewhere.
Yeah. And so was her mom, your mom and dad, or her mom and dad, or did she, or is just
different dad,
different
same
dad,
mom,
same mom? Wow.
Yeah. It's so unorthodox. It's just like, it's almost like one of those tragic stories how my biological family happened. But it is what it is, right? And we have the same mother, and we communicate regularly now. It's awesome. It's just a very unorthodox. And
wow.
And I have a half brother too. So
I think I've had a good year too in 2020, and it's been doing that inner work, like you were saying, like the meditation, surrounding yourself with supportive people, developing meaningful relationships, just doing all of that work, understanding yourself. And I've been like being less busy, and more time with myself and the quiet time. And that has helped so much, but it was so hard for me to do because I had some stuff I had to overcome as well. And that's being busy was my way of avoiding it. And it's hard work, but it's so worth it.
100%. I went from being, an addict to everything to being a workaholic. Uh-huh. And my cop out was, because I didn't deal with the emotional baggage for 14 years after being sober. And I mean, I went through hell in those 14 years, and I still stayed sober. I had business partners steal millions of dollars from me. I was worth millions of dollars on paper, and then homeless 3 different times. I had a house fire that I lost everything.
How'd you go through all that and not drink?
I don't know. God. It's the only explanation, right? God or my higher power, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. That's the only way. When I finally quit drinking, it was or doing drugs and drinking, right? Because it was both. When I stopped, I made a pact with God and I said, God, either kill me right now or help me stay sober because I don't want to live another day like this anymore. I just don't. I never want to live like this again. I had a DUI in 2004. I fell asleep on the train tracks in my car. They had to reroute, I think, 7 trains. I was parked up on the platform down into the train tracks. Like I was ready to be a meal for that train. And they had to reroute trains. And I was across the street from the sheriff's office and they didn't even see me.
Mike, there's a reason you're still here.
Oh, there's many reasons because I've OD'd many times. I've drowned. I've done tons of stuff. I last count was I was clinically dead between 11 and 13 times from all different reasons. I'm definitely here for a purpose, and I'm going to fulfill that.
Do you know? What is it?
Yeah, I'm here to elevate the world, to touch as many people as possible and help them be their best self, and at the same time be my best self, and use my experience and my knowledge and my God-given gifts to make an impact and be able to elevate humanity because the systems in this world are broken.
Do you do that for a living? What do you do for a living?
I create companies, build companies, help others build companies. I do all sorts of fun stuff. My main company right now is an education company. I want to redevelop the global education system from scratch, and that's one of my companies. And we've been working on it for over 3.5 years now. And after the election, we have a few huge meetings to start moving things forward. Like there's many things going on in the background, and I own 7 different companies, and I'm a part of 5 others, and like I'm doing so many different things. But now I take the time out to be me and do me and be present for my kids. And I got to say, I'm happier than I've ever been.
Yeah.
Like I had a phone call with this woman yesterday, and in an hour on the phone, she's like, I only have 15 minutes. I said, okay. So we stayed on the phone an hour. And by the end of the call, she's like, again, you've changed my life. You've just changed my life. And I told her, I said, look, last time we talked, I said, reach out to me when you need, and you never did. So if you keep doing it that way, then we're going to keep having these conversations every once in a while. It's not about, I don't charge people for my time. I don't do any of that. It's not that I think it's a bad way to earn a living. It's just not who I am. Right. I'm going to make enough money changing the world that I don't need to make money off people in that way. And the people that I'm helping change will probably one day play a role in everything that I'm doing to change the world. And I don't look for anything in return because it comes back in other ways.
Yeah.
What Annie Lee did for me and what I've done for her is it's given us this bond that's unbreakable for the rest of our lives.
Who's Annie Lee?
Annie Lee she's a very close friend. We have a deep relationship, a very deep bond, almost unexplainable. She works for something new, which is the recruiting and advisory services to change the staffing industry basically from scratch, completely revolutionize hiring people and changing companies and saving bottom line at the same time, but really putting people first. But then she also has her own health and wellness and detoxification business that she does on the side. And then she also does a ton of podcasts. And she's just, we're really close, really good friends, and we help each other in many ways. And we're there for each other. And we've both helped each other transform over the last, I guess it's November now. So I guess, let's say since June.
How did you meet her? If somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh, wow, but I don't know any of the people like that. Like, how did you meet her? How would you recommend that people reach out and meet people and get those, find those people that they want to develop those close relationships with?
For me, it's just putting myself out there, right? You're not going to meet real people until you're real. Like, you've got to be real with yourself before you're going to meet anybody else, right? Like, when I was at the lowest moment of my life, I said earlier that, March 5th, the day before I got my kids, I put a video out, or March 3rd or whatever it was, I put a video out and she reached out to me. We connected, we communicated back and forth. And it was a simple message that everything is going to be okay. And I was at my lowest moment.
Put a video out where? On the LinkedIn?
On LinkedIn. And she reached out through LinkedIn. We connected and we were going back and forth. And that was the lowest day of my life. Even after everything I've been through in my life, that was the lowest day. It was day 10 of waiting for the judge to put through the order. It was being stuck in Arkansas by myself. It was not having clothes because I packed for 4 days when I originally started this process.
So what the video say? What the video say that you put on LinkedIn? Because typically you put stuff that's professional on LinkedIn.
Not me. I don't believe in that. That's crap. I was crying. I was miserable. I was talking about how bad everything was. I was just real. I was real, exactly where I was. And it was as simple as somebody that I've never met before sent me a message and said, everything is going to be okay. And the next day I got my kids. And then we didn't talk for a couple months. And then in May, at the end of May, we started communicating pretty much daily. And then we've just started building a relationship, a friendship, and we have this tremendous bond to where I've got her back, she's got my back, and we just go and we're helping people daily.
So
Everything.
be yourself, and then you're going to attract people that are real and that are themselves, and you're going to attract the people that you need to have in your life. If you're not being real, if you're not being yourself, if you're putting on a facade, if you're one way at home and another way on Facebook or another way on LinkedIn to just make an impression, then that's not really you.
Well, and okay, so here's what I'm going to say about that, right? Society raises us to be duplicitous. Society teaches us to be duplicitous, be one person at home, and then always show your best face to everyone else. And it's very sick and twisted. Now, I believe that's why they say narcissism's on the rise, sociopaths are on the rise, everything else, because everybody's creating these alter egos of what people want us to be.
Yeah.
So why can't we reverse this and say, just be you, find out who you are? Because none of us even know. Until you start doing that work, we have no clue who we are and what we like and what we want to be involved in. Like, we could think we're the happiest people in the world, but until we do that deep work, we don't even know who we are. Like, we could think we're happy working this job for 25 years and one day just wake up and kill ourselves because society says we failed, right? Like, I mean, it's all these little things. And at the end of the day, society needs to change. And that's
basically what I say happened. What I feel like happened to me is, at age 17, I made a decision to go into the military, to go to the Naval Academy. Yeah. And probably for the wrong reasons, I made that decision, or who knows, who says they're right or wrong, but I didn't know a lot about the military. Right. And then it led to just 38 years working for the Navy, raising my kids, being a single parent, just head down, couldn't even putting everyone first. And then it comes time for me to retire, eligible to retire. I decide to retire, and everyone's like, well, you should do this, you should do that, you should, go and do this job. And I'm like, I decided I'm going to figure out what I want to do. And then a month after I retired, I found out my kid's dad was sick with cancer, and then he died in December, this past December. His funeral at Arlington is Monday. And I just saw him on his deathbed, and I thought to myself, I'm not going to be like that when I die, meaning he had, I know, a lot of regrets, and I'm not going to die with regrets. I'm not going to die with a house full of stuff. I'm going to make sure I'm organized and don't leave my kids in this mess that he did. And he was somebody too that like you said, your mom got nicer when she got sick. He completely changed for those 6 months. He was the nicest. It was just so different. It was really nice to be able to have a little bit of closure with him. But that's what I think a lot of people are struggling with. I agree. They don't know who I am, because who I am isn't the title of my job.
Yes, 100%. I mean, I've come to the point now where no matter what company I create, what company I run, what company I participate in, I'm not going to ever have a title. I don't want a title. I'm done with labels. I'm done with titles. The janitor is just as special as the CEO. The chairman of the board is only as important as what decisions he has the ability to make for the good of the people that work there. And I refuse to allow myself to be labeled, and I never want my children to be labeled, right? Because labels to me is just divisive nature of society and how we like to categorize people. We're not a label. We are individuals, and I have ADHD. I have many things in my life. I'm type 2 bipolar. I've been diagnosed with it, right? I'm not a coach. I don't have certifications. I barely have a GED because I got thrown out of 2 high schools. I have life, and I know who I am and what I'm here for. And I will help others find their purpose and find their reason for being here, and help them find themselves. Because whether you're 80 or whether you're 20, it doesn't matter. Finding yourself is the greatest gift. Again, what you were saying about regrets, right? Like, people change when they see their mortality because they're scared, right? It's fear that forces them, wow, I was a scumbag my whole life. And I was never really a scumbag. I just did lots of shitty things. But what I realized is I wasn't living up to my potential either. And if I can spend the rest of my life, whatever it is, 40, 42, 43 years, 100 years, right? Who knows? Maybe they put my head into a robot or something. But if I can live the rest of my life on that mission of elevating others and lifting people up, I'm all for it.
Well, I'm happy to know you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that we did this, and you're patient. I appreciate you, because my kids are interesting at times, right? They've all been through different abuse, and they've all had different issues, and is trying to work with all three different personalities and all three different issues and just juggling it all.
Really
So,
patient with them, I can tell. So thank you for being on the podcast, Mike.
no, thank you so much. And I'm telling you, I'll always come back. Anything you need, let me know. And I'm always willing to come back.
I highly recommend you follow Michael on LinkedIn. He puts some awesome videos out there. He's just being real. Other people on LinkedIn that I follow that are real are Annie Lieb and Kelly Blackman, and I'll put their LinkedIn profiles in the show notes. I plan on using LinkedIn Live to start getting my message out as well in calendar year 2021. I've been a little nervous about doing that, but I'm ready. I don't know why. Why is it easier for me to go on Facebook Live than it is LinkedIn Live? But I'm going to do it. The start was the conversation I had with Michael on the 2nd of January. I'll put a link to that conversation in the show notes as well. We were just talking about you are not alone. And there's so many people out there that want to help you out. Consider joining the Onward Movement. I'll put a link to the Facebook group in the show notes. And I'll be talking more about the Onward Movement on LinkedIn as well. I'm kicking off another round of my group accelerator coaching program. That program is all about learning how to discover your authentic self, how to release the fear of judgment, and how to create the life of your dreams. If you're interested, send me an email or message me on LinkedIn or Facebook, and we can schedule a conversation to see if the Onward Accelerator program is for you. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for listening.